yourself a friend. Lay down your defenses and fears. You're welcome here. Yes, you're welcome here. Yes, you're welcome here.
Good afternoon. I'm Rev Dave Thompson. Good afternoon. I think we have video, audio now. I'm Rev Dave Thompson. I'd love to welcome you back to our Civil Human Bible study. I'm a civil human minister, and what that means is that I focus my ministry on building human peace and common ground. And so in that effort, I'm looking at my own spiritual heritage to see those things that I believe can be applicable to all human beings across the board, regardless of our different faiths, our different politics, and our different lifestyles. So I hope you join me today as we're looking at Matthew chapter 19, and we're chapter 21, starting in verse 22. But what do you think? A man had 2 sons, and he came to the first and said, "Son, go, work today in my vineyard." He answered and said, "I will not." But afterward he regretted it and went. Then he came to the second, and likewise. And he answered and said, "I go, sir," but did not go. Which of the 2 did the will of his father? They said to him, they being the Pharisees, "The first." Jesus said to them, "Assuredly I say to you that tax collectors and harlots are entering the kingdom of God before you. For John came to you in a way of righteousness, and you did not believe him. But tax collectors and harlots believed him. And when you saw it, you did not afterward relent and believe in him." Today's passage is actually one of my more favorite passages. And the reason for that is because it is something that has been really dear to my experience as a person of faith and as a minister and just as a human being. This particular setting right now, I want to set it up a little bit for you to give you an idea of what's going on right now and why we're talking about this particular story. So Jesus is in the temple right now, which is like the big religious place that they all go in Jerusalem, which is the capital city of Israel. And it's Passover, which is, one of the yearly big events that they put on each year. And hundreds of thousands of people pilgrimage to Jerusalem just for this particular holiday. And right now Jesus is in the temple. You may recall that the day before, in his time, and actually a few studies ago, we saw Jesus throwing people out of the temple and turning over the money changers' tables and basically clearing out all of the commerce that was developing and the economy that was surrounding the temple and everything that had to be done there. And he's trying to bring them back to a place of seeking after what is good, of helping those who are in need, instead of what right now the religious leaders are making a lot of money off of the hard work of other people because they pay taxes to this temple, and their burdens are paying for very lavish lifestyles of their ministers and of their spiritual leaders. And really, in their time, it's also the political leaders of the day, because this is a religious they call it a theocracy, but basically it means their laws in this nation are basically governed by their religious beliefs as well. So what's going on right here? Jesus tells us a story about 2 kids. It's interesting, here you see the word 2 sons, and I'm not fond of that. It's not really in the Greek here, the original language that it's written in. The word teknon is used, which is really just child. It's a genderless term, so I really think Jesus was trying to make a point of saying it could be any child. But for whatever reason, because of our sort of patriarchal society back then, we've translated it as sons. Anywho, the story is of 2 basic children. So the father comes to one of the childs and says, "Hey, I need you to go and to work in the vineyard today." And the first child says, "No, I'm not going to." They take off, and then they have second thoughts. and they feel bad about what they've done. They change direction. They go back and do some work. Then the father approaches the second child and says to that child, go today to do some work. And that child said, absolutely, I'm on my way. And then in fact, he doesn't actually go and do anything. And then you see Jesus turn to the people who are approaching him. These are the chief priests. So in this nation's eyes, and the people who are reading this particular text especially, when they see Jesus talking to the chief priests, he is talking to the leaders of his day, like the head honchos in his civilization. These are the best of the best of the best when it comes to being good by the definition, by following the law by its every letter that it has. They're perfect when it comes to all of these religious requirements that they have upheld as being significant in their lives. But Jesus is making a really strong and pointed reference to them right now that would have been highly embarrassing and hugely controversial. Right? So he's turning them right now and he's saying, hey, let me tell you this little story. This story happens to be an allegory and you happen to be one of the main characters. Which character are you? The one who helped or the one who didn't? Jesus is making a point here that the chief priests and the religious leaders of his day said that they were going to do all of these things, that they would follow after what is right and what is good and what is just. But when it's all said and done, they didn't do anything. They haven't lifted a hand for the poor. The money that is supposed to go to help those who are suffering in our society, they are going directly to their bank accounts of the day, whatever that is, so that they can dress themselves in even more spectacular robes, who can have more lush accommodations. And then Jesus says this, which is really, I think, as a human being, just not only just has some chutzpah, to borrow a Yiddish term, but also just so brave to say this. He says, the tax collectors and the harlots are entering the kingdom of God before you. Now, I don't know if you're able to capture like the whole controversy around this. Jesus is sitting in what would be maybe our House of Representatives or even our Supreme Court, and telling the court justices or the representatives that the people that they represent who are suffering, who they think of are less of, they think are sort of the peons below the poor, the people who in their eyes are just people to sway via opinion so they can stay in their position. Jesus is pointing out that those people are actually changing their lives. That when Jesus has been out there and talking to them, they've listened and done something about it. But these religious leaders, not a thing. And notice also this. He says that they're getting into this kingdom of heaven before the chief priests. In other words, Jesus is not only claiming that they're saying one thing and doing completely another thing, but he's also saying that they aren't even within the confines of the kingdom, that they're not even in the society of God the way that he sees it. Now, how in the world does this apply to us here today as humans, 2,000 years removed, right? We don't have a theocracy. We don't look for, well, yet anyway, we don't have the rules that they did. But in many ways, we do have the same situation. This particular situation, this particular story was one that was difficult for me early on in my own particular spirituality. And even as a minister, I came from a very holiness, Pentecostal, name it and claim it, rolling in the aisles, health, wealth, and prosperity, and healing, and all of that. That's what I came from and grew up in. And so for me, when Jesus is saying that harlots and tax collectors being like the bad people of the day, that these people were getting into heaven and the religious leaders weren't, was really astonishing to me, because I had become another Pharisee, another religious leader type of Jesus's time, meaning I was only concerned with making myself more and more pure and being a better and better person and having a better and better life. And I had absolutely nothing to do with actually helping those who are suffering in our society. even today, I mean, land sakes, you've got these ministers who are making millions of dollars, millions. And I'm reminded of Jesus' statement to the young ruler where he says, give all that you have, sell it, and give it to the poor. I dare say that most ministers who have that much money and are living such a luxurious lifestyle would find it difficult to do that. The one thing that I love about this particular passage for us as humans today, for me, just as a human being today, when I look at this passage, I see a strong truth, and that is, it doesn't matter what we say, it doesn't matter what group we belong to, it doesn't matter our religious preferences, it doesn't matter what politics we assign ourselves to. What matters is what we do. What matters is what we do in our lives really for others. In this, as Jesus puts it 2,000 years ago in Kingdom of Heaven, but I might suggest in a society of this universe, where we want to look at how we can be together in a peaceful way and in a way that allows the best amount of prosperity. And I don't mean that financially. I just mean in the sense of life, having a full life and a happy life. The only way that we do that is not by saying that we belong to a group that claims to be good. It doesn't mean that we assign ourselves to a particular religion or a particular church or a particular denomination or a particular mosque, for instance. What matters in our society, to create a peaceful society, we have to pay attention to the suffering. We've got to look around. And we've got to start creating those solutions for homeless people, for those who are sick among us, regardless of what nation we're in, regardless of our healthcare solutions. People are sick, and that is not good because their suffering may seem like it doesn't touch us at first, but eventually it will. And the more that those who suffer are not helped, the more anger and resentment builds in them, to the point where they have been left with no other option but to seek violence as a way to get attention to their plight. I pray that we don't get to that place. Though I know in America, for where I live, having been on the side of limited money, it is very difficult to pick oneself up by their bootstraps. We think it's not any big deal, but the reality is these days, with all the regulations, with all the requirements, with all the fees and all of the accounts of credit and all of the history that we have that stays with us everywhere we go, it is very difficult to move from a place of being poor to being a place of comfort, not just of luxury, but just of stability and happiness. It didn't used to be that way. You could go start a new life somewhere from zero, blank slate, and go from there. The reason why I bring this up is because I just want to encourage you, as I've been really reflecting on this particular passage about the two sons, or really the two children, that we think about the fact that our religion, our faith, our politics, the way that we live our lifestyle, the way that we dress or eat, or how we talk, those things seem important to us. But what really matters when it comes down to it is what we do, not only for ourselves, but for other people. Because for us to move forward as a society where we can have peace and avoid the violence of conflict, we have to start looking at each other and have to start doing the things that we've talked about in this society that Jesus brings up, that are vital human values, and that's having compassion, showing mercy, creating peace. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I might just encourage you, as I've had to look at my own particular religious background and even my politics, and look at the difference between what I assign myself to, the memberships I create with myself and align myself to, the difference between that and what I'm actually doing to make a difference in this life and to be actually a good person to others. I might encourage you to do those reflections today and to think about how you and I can both move forward to help those who are truly suffering as human beings. Thank you for joining me. If you have any thoughts or comments or reflections on what we're talking about today, please put them in the comments below. I really appreciate it. I know other people do as well. Also, there's a button down here if you're on YouTube that you can click. Please subscribe there. If you're on Facebook, please like my page. That way we can keep in contact with one another and I can share some really exciting things that are going to be happening down the road here. So until we see each other tomorrow, live at noon, I want you to know that I love you. And I hope you choose to love yourself. It's the only love that we have any control over in this world. And now, I ask that you would join me as we go about the rest of our day, loving our neighbors the same way. Thank you.